Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting here on Thursday, the 2nd of September. Welcome everyone to the meeting. Can I start by taking any apologies for absence for this morning's meeting?
I've received apologies from Lynn Houghton and John Sanderson.
Thank you very much. Can we also note the minutes of the previous meeting, which are contained in pages 1 to 6. I will note that there is an amendment to the minutes because it does indicate that some people weren't present who were present. So Reverend Lennox, Paul Rickard and John Sanderson will be added to the paper minutes, although they are actually added onto the online version. So can I just run through those pages if you have anything you want to raise as a matter of accuracy? So page 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So I'll take it that we can accept those as a true and accurate record of the meeting which was held earlier. Right, thank you very much. Do we have any disclosures of members' interests? That's anything which you haven't already declared on your council declaration. I'm not seeing anyone with that indicating a hand. That's fine. Great. So if we now move on to item 4 on this morning's agenda, which is the forward plan of key decisions, which will be taken by Chris Angus. Chris.
Thanks, Chair. The forward plan there for members to note, there's 2 items on there which will be coming to facts in October, which is the school reorganisation plan and the education infrastructure contribution policy. That will be coming to facts on the 7th of October and going to Cabinet on the 12th.
Thank you, Chris. We're now moving on to item number 5, which is the schools forum role and its decision-making powers, which is something I'd asked to be brought to this committee. This report, which you'll see contained on page 13 to page 32, is going to be taken by Sue Aviston. So, Sue, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. The report is to provide Family and Children's Services Overview Scrutiny Committee with further information about the role of Schools Forum and its powers, its consultative role and its impact in relation to the school funding in Northumberland in 21-22. And this is an additional report. Previously reported to facts was the role of School Forum in more detail. Today is to talk about the individual details and the impact that that has. So as previously reported, you'll be aware that national regulations govern the operation of Schools Forum, and in your papers there's a link there to the full copy of those regulations so that you can read them and understand. These regulations were updated in 2020, and this was just to allow meetings to happen virtually, and that's something that has proved very popular with forum members, being as they travel from Berwick to Kielder. So it's something that we're going to continue to look to do in the future for Schools Forum. So, as I've already mentioned, Schools Forum generally has a consultative role, and the final decisions being made are made by Cabinet as the decision-making body of the local authority. But usually the decisions need to be made very quickly, and therefore the decisions are usually delegated to a senior officer and the Cabinet member for Children's Services under the delegated powers that exist within the authority. And this again was the case for 21-22. Schools Forum generally meets 5 times a year and they receive reports usually on the setting of the funding formula values for the financial year to come, and that's quite a long process. They also agree consultation documents and the proposals that go to wider school consultation. So while Schools Forum look at the detail, they always consult more widely with all schools because of the impact that the decisions or the recommendations that they make to Cabinet will have. They also have a role in terms of budget monitoring, so they monitor the performance of the DSG overall, and that's made up of 3 blocks: the Central Services block, Schools block and then the High Needs block. So that is the role predominantly of Schools Forum. They were also consulted with around national consultations, and they provide the response to national consultations on behalf of Schools Forum and Northumberland schools more generally. In order to support the work of Schools Forum, there are also 2 committees that run, and that's the High Needs Committee. Now, this is a committee that looks at the high needs block and and obviously the high needs block is used to fund specialist services within the council that we operate in schools, as well as place funding for special schools, independent schools and our alternative providers. The second committee is the Funding Formula Committee, and this is a group of people that look at the detail of the funding formula, the impacts that it has, and the funding that actually comes into Northumberland. And really, that's the role of those two groups. Just a little bit more about the detail and the work that they undertake. So one of the key considerations that there has been for Schools Forum in recent years has been the implementation of a national funding formula. So you'll be aware, in the past, the funding has come into the local authority and it's been completely the local authority's decision how to distribute that. But over the last 5 years, there's been a framework in place and a policy in place of central government to equalise out funding to make sure that it's fair nationally. So we have worked, or Schools Forum has worked over the last 5 years to align our Northumberland funding formula values with those nationally. And that's obviously been done on a gradual approach to ensure, less turbulence in the system for our schools. So as a result of that has now resulted in the vast majority of our formula values used in Northumberland now being in line with the national funding formula values, and those are shown in appendices 1 of the report. Where Northumberland values do differ from national, this is generally due to previous precedents that have been set, and now just relate to 4 factors that are detailed in the report on the top of page 3. And as in previous years, work will continue when setting the 2022-23 funding formula factors to gradually bring these in line with the national rates again. And a principle has already been agreed with Schools Forum to do that in a 2-stepped stage process moving forward. So Schools Forum has also been consulted on the work undertaken on sparsity funding, which is one of the formula factors, and they've obviously taken a very keen interest in this factor, given the importance that it is in Northumberland due to the high number of small rural schools that we have. And paragraph 10 shows the funding formula values in relation to sparsity. But what also should be noted is that Schools Forum have actually lobbied the SFA and central government, obviously with support of our lead member, around how sparsity is actually calculated. So in years gone by, it has always been calculated as the crow flies. But as we understand in Northumberland, there tends to be rivers in the way and roads children have to travel a lot further to cross a bridge before they can actually get to that school. And therefore, we were successful in that lobbying last year. And for Northumberland only at that time, they did use road distances. That also allowed us to include an additional 6 schools that then were eligible for sparsity funding. And then for the year 22-23, the SFA have decided to adopt that as a policy nationally, and as therefore has a wider increase in the sparsity funding that's actually available. FACS members will also remember, I think probably back in February when we bought the report to set the funding formula values, that you asked for a copy of the impact that had on the individual schools. So again, for your information, that is contained at appendices 2 of the report for your reference. One of the things that we asked about was around the powers of Schools Forum and their decision-making powers. So predominantly their powers of decision-making is around delegation. So again, there's a section of that in the report that sets out in paragraph 17 the services that applies to and the costs associated with those 4 de-delegated services. So again, that's only on behalf of the maintained schools, though, that Schools Forum make the decision to buy that service back whole scale for all schools. And then on paragraphs 18 to 22, although not directly related to the decisions of Schools Forum, it just sets out the funding decisions that have been made in the recent months. which you'll see that Northumberland schools have benefited from additional just over £344,000 of funding being returned to them from some unspent contingency that exists within the DSG. As well as nearly £700,000 worth of additional funding into schools as a result of the COVID grant funding that the local authority has also received. So that just gives you a more broader picture and the impact on funding for schools as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Before I open this up to questions and comments, it was just two things. One, composition of schools forum is made up of schools, trade unions. Do you just want to talk us through what the composition is of the forum as well in terms of its membership?
Yeah. And that was subject to the previous report to facts. So again, the representatives of the maintained schools as well as academies, representatives of the diocese, our post-16 providers, our early years providers, and as you rightly said, our unions. And again, it's a mixture of chairs of governors or governors as well as head teachers that sit on forum. The split between schools and academies is based on the number of schools and academies that exist. So you will see that the constitution changes on a regular basis as more schools convert to become academies, and our membership reflects that in Schools Forum as well.
And I think it's worth noting as well, I mean, congratulations on the sparsity, which brings an extra 6 schools in, but we also managed to change policy as well on the secondary high school issue as well, because there was a funding anomaly between the funding of high schools and the funding of secondary schools, and the forum lobbied successfully on that to change that policy. So whilst this is a little bit of a hidden gem in the council, it has an awful lot of power. So we perhaps need to get it to do a bit more as well. So questions, right, Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. And if I could just add my congratulations to that as well, because the work that was done to change that funding for the distance, it doesn't just affect our residents, and our children in this area. It has had a knock-on effect, on a much wider scale. And thank you for adding the extra detail that we did ask previously with regards to that. And that's where my question lies, because we've got 5 pages of detail with all of the individual schools there, and I can see some significant changes throughout in the figures from the 2021 to the 21-22. Some of them are quite small, some of them are quite significant in the increases, but there's around half a dozen that's actually dropped. And I just want to ask, is that a result of the changes in the funding formula, or is that perhaps a result of the changes in the numbers of children attending those schools?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Swinburne. It is due to the numbers of children. So overall school funding did increase quite significantly last year, predominantly due to teachers' pension being rolled into the formula for the first time as well. But where you see those numbers, particularly probably some of our small rural schools in Berwick, you probably notice there's a number there that have got less funding. That is solely on pupils, because now the national funding formula works very much on individual pupil-led funding rather than the more generic factors that we would have seen previously in the funding formula.
Great, thank you. I just wanted that sort of clarified, that nobody was getting the money cut. It was just down to the fact that it's based on the number of pupils, and if there's less pupils going into the school, that's why there's less money going in. Thank you.
Any more comments or questions on the report?
Yes, Chair.
Sorry, Trevor, Councillor Thorne.
Yes. Are there no longer any county councillors on the school forum?
The lead member is on the forum. So, Guy, do you want to take that on?
I go to it. Am I officially a member?
An observer.
Yeah, I'm an observer, sort of a non-voting member. But they're all. It's a good thing to go to. They're all very clear. It's good to get an idea from the ground on what's going on, and they give you that perspective, and they feed into the cabinet decision-making process in that way. So it's good.
No, I just feel that, in the past, I think I was a member of the schools forum, or maybe I was an observer, but again, it's useful to have that link and that input from, our sort of view. So now, obviously, Guy is leading that input. Yeah. No, good. Thank you.
It might be worthwhile for those people at home who are watching this who didn't hear that question, is what you're asking is the, we can actually pass the microphone along, but you're asking for the discrepancy on funding on...
I'm just asking for an explanation.
Sorry, let's try the question again, because I think it's a valid question, so let's
Thank
hear
you.
it.
It was just an explanation of page 19, where it's the final NFF and NCC funding formula values. Just the NFF for low attainment primary is 1,095 and the NCC values is 840. I just wondered what the explanation was for that.
Yes, so I think this is one of the things that I said around, you know, precedent had been previously set. So if you look at the deprivation round free school meals, both in primary and secondary, we pay over the national. So again, it's targeting the same pupils. So this will be part of the process that we undertake this year is to change that balance. So while they're getting it in less in one factor, they're getting more in another one. But it is targeted at the same pupils. But that's the precedent that we'd previously set around deprivation in Northumberland.
Okay, thank you. Right, so I'm not seeing any other hands on that. I think it is a very useful report, and certainly I think members will welcome the section which looks at each individual school, its income, and what that budget looks like. And as Councillor Swindon and Sue, you've rightly pointed out, that school budgets are predicated on school numbers, on children's within school. So the budgets haven't actually been cut. It's if you have fewer children attending, the budget will go down. But I think that level of detail is really useful. And I don't know what members feel as if maybe they would like to get at least sight of some of the school finance figures, maybe on a quarterly basis or half-yearly basis.
It'll be an annual basis.
Annual basis,
yeah, annual
right.
basis.
Okay.
Yes. So normally the budgets will be set in February. So potentially an April-May forum if you tax committee if you wanted it.
So I think if we could just have that as a paper copy given to members for information, and if obviously there are any questions, you can bring that to the committee. So we're asked to note the report. Sorry, Mr. Hodgson, I missed you there.
Just to follow on from the points you were making there. I mean, obviously the top line figures would show that the school budgets are looking healthier than they were 12 months ago. But is the reality that there are some hidden costs there that you referred to things like the teachers' pensions and so on, that would actually mean that schools had less money to actually spend on the pupils because of additional costs for staffing, etc. So does this mask, to a certain extent, what the reality is?
There may be individual schools, but again, a report that comes to Schools Forum really on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis, talks about school balances increased. And what we have seen is there are less schools in deficit and more schools have more funding in their balances. So I think overall that impact is not what we're seeing on the ground.
Yeah. And I also want to bring in Kath McAvoy-Carr.
Just to say that, as Sue's just highlighted there, a number of schools, the number of schools who have previously been in deficit have significantly reduced over the last few years. I think it's fair to say that there's a group of us monitor and provide support to those schools who are in deficit in order to help them to come out of that deficit budget. We don't sit back and just allow them to manage that themselves. Some schools would prefer are happy to do so, but we offer the support of our financial services where we can in order to help them manage that. And I think the important bit is the additional funding that we've actually provided to schools out with the ordinary funding that we would normally provide in order to help support through this very difficult past 12 to 18 months.
And I think just adding to that point, I think everyone assumes over the past few decades there's been a movement of a decreasing amount of input from local authorities to schools. So a lot of schools have academised, effectively running on their own. I'm delighted that in Northumberland we've actually bucked that trend. So as Kath's pointed out there, we have a support mechanism for those schools who are having some challenges with setting budgets and operating budgets, and we go in there and we work very closely with them. Plus the the excellent school improvement service as well, where we actually go there and work with schools on how we improve their performance, their league table performance. So, we have not stood back and just let schools disappear. We're very much hands-on in partnership with schools, whether they be maintained schools, that is a council school, or an academy. And I think that is something that we should recognise and celebrate in Northumberland, because it is a family of schools. Doesn't matter who you are. And I think that's a really good thing. And that's testimony to the officers. So thank you very much, Sue, for that. Excellent report. We've noted it, and we'll look forward to getting those figures again in the next financial year. So we're now moving on to item number 6, which is the SEND revisit, which took place in May 2021. Kath McAvoy-Carr is going to take this, and then I'm going to hand over to Sam Barron and Audrey Kingan to do the detail on the report, and that is pages 33 to 36 in your agenda today.
Thanks, Chair. I just really wanted to set a little bit of a context before I bring Audrey and Sam into the discussion and to present the report. For most of you, you will be aware that every local area, and by local area I mean the local authority, which includes education, health and care, are subject to a SEND inspection under the Code of Practice. We had ours in September-October 2018, and unfortunately were made subject to a written statement of action. I think it's probably fair to say at that stage that we weren't surprised by that, because we knew that we hadn't made the progress in relation to the Code of Practice that we wanted to make. The staff and the parents and the new Parent Carer Forum and our children and young people and our key partners in education and health have made extraordinary progress over the last 2 years. We did expect a revisit last year, but COVID got in the way, and very soon after the revisits commenced, we knew we were in to get a visit, and that occurred in May of this year. I think it's probably fair to say we were a little bit perplexed by getting a visit so early into the programme, but actually felt that it was probably good to get that out of the way so that we could reflect on the outcomes. It's fair to say, as a local area, we were very pleased with the outcome of that, which means that we are, and not wanting to steal Audrey and Sam's thunder, we are now no longer subject to a written statement of action, but that doesn't mean that we are complacent, and I just wanted to reinforce that message. We are keen to continue to improve our services, and our families and our parents and our carers and our schools and our young people tell us regularly where they think that we need to improve those services as we move forward. The big thing for me, though, is I just wanted to say, take an opportunity to say a huge thank you, because everybody, and by everybody I mean parents and carers, children, young people, schools, health colleagues and local authority representatives, and apologies if I've missed anybody, have worked extraordinarily hard over the last 3 years to try and improve the services and the provision that we offer to our children and young people who have special education needs and disabilities. And a number of those people worked extraordinarily hard during the SEND revisit to make sure that the progress that we'd made was demonstrated across the board. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to be able to say that very clearly to everybody. We've still got a way to go, but I think we are pleased with the progress that we are making. So on that, I will hand over to Sam.
As Kath has said, we did receive our notification of our SEND revisit in May. It was early May, with the inspectors coming between the 19th and 21st of May. They were focusing on progress on the 3 areas of weakness from our written statement of action, and they reviewed a wealth of information around evidence of progress and the impact that has had on the lives of our children and young people. They spoke to NHS England and DFE, who have been monitoring us on a quarterly visit, and they met with frontline practitioners and senior leaders from across education, health and social care, children's and adults, and the Parent Carer Forum. They also looked into the quality of our education healthcare plans, including contacting parents to understand their views around those plans. There were a number of strengths highlighted in the report, particularly the collegiate approach to the delivery of SEND developments. What came through very strong in the feedback that we received was the quality and the strength of the partnership that we have in Northumberland in terms of working across different organisations, different agencies, different teams, and working around supporting individual children and young people's needs. The strategy, the improved quality of our education healthcare plans were also noted, and in terms of bucking a bit of a national trend, our strong waiting times for children and young people to receive support for mental health was also commented on. They did note that there was increasing consistency around early identification of children and young people with SEND in schools, and noted that our relatively new Parent Carer Forum has been providing effective challenge to the SEND partnership. And lastly, the academic outcomes are improving and exclusions for learners with SEND have reduced year on year for 3 years. So the outcome, as Kath has said, is that sufficient progress has been made in addressing those 3 areas of weakness. So the formal quarterly support and challenge visits from the DFE and NHS England will cease. They did note a significant improvement with a seismic change in leadership and culture since Northumberland was inspected in October 2018. And as Kath talked about there, the context of this is that they were coming to revisit our written statement of action, our action plan that we set out that we would deliver in 2018. It's coming up to 3 years ago now. So the big focus is what are we going to do next and how are we going to move forward, having acknowledged that there are areas that we need to hold in focus and to continue to develop. So what I've done for the next 2 slides is I've included the 4 key priorities of the strategy. I've just put a couple of bullet points under each one to highlight some of the work that's going to be happening over the coming 3 years. So our first priority is working together and communication. Improving communication across the system. That's from the level of working with individual children and young people, how we communicate as a multi-agency team supporting them, but also how we communicate with our schools, our strategic partners. So a communication strategy is in place. And increasing our understanding of the lived experiences of children and young people and their families, because if we have a better understanding of how our families receive services, that will enable us to better inform future developments. In terms of delivering the right support at the right time, we'll be establishing a pathway for children and young people with sensory processing difficulties. And we're going to focus on further improving early identification. Now that's across the board, but it's also concentrating on specific learning difficulties and ASD in girls. Our third priority is around inclusive education, and that is around providing our schools and our practitioners with the right knowledge and skills to be able to deliver support to our young learners. And that will be across education, health and social care, children and adults. We're also improving the leadership and delivery of support to SEND learners in school, in mainstream schools and special schools through the whole school programme, which focuses on self-evaluation of SEND delivery within schools and improvement. And then our last priority is preparation for adulthood, where we will be refreshing the careers offer, and that will be overseen by a PFA lead, and look to increase the range of post-16 options. Now, that's not everything that we're going to do. The action plan is being co-produced and will come back to facts in the future, but that's just a flavour of some of the ways forward that we're going to be taking after the SEND revisit.
I think, Chair, just to finish off, what you haven't got is a copy of the letter from Ofsted in the pack, and we'll make sure that that does come round to the committee. But what you will see in the feedback from Ofsted, you will see that it is peppered with all of those elements that Sam's just talked about, particularly around the strategic priorities, ensuring that the education priorities in Northumberland are aligned to SEND. So we talk about all and every in those priorities, and therefore it's a very inclusive approach overall. But the priorities, particularly around preparation for adulthood, working with our young people much younger, not waiting till they're just, you know, the title almost misleads to some extent, because there has been some understanding, and it's a national understanding, that preparation for adulthood begins perhaps, you know, at teenage years. Actually, for a lot of our young people and their parents, carers and wider support infrastructure, beginning that discussion and that journey much younger is very, very possible, and that's a commitment that we've made as a part of this. So we will make sure that that letter comes out to the committee.
So what I'd like to do before going to questions, I'd like to bring in Guy Renner-Thompson on this.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is a most excellent report, as was the actual Sendry visit. All the more fantastic when you consider the context. It happened during not only a pandemic but also a local government election, which was in May. So for the senior leadership team to be able to achieve this with that background, I think is absolutely fantastic. It's improvement in SEND has been a political priority of ours since the Conservatives took control in 2017. But under Councillor Daly and then me, it remains a priority of mine. But really the hard work on the ground was done by Kath McAvoy-Carr and her senior leadership team. And this is a huge achievement for them that they can hold with them for the rest of their lives. We just need to make sure that the progress continues, and we keep improving, and we make sure that we keep on this steady footing. But I'm highly confident in the team that we can do that.
Good. Right. The floor is yours. Any questions, comments, observations? Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report there, Sam. Anecdotally, out in the streets, parents and families are saying there's huge improvements in the county over the last few years, which is fantastic to hear. Communications you spoke about there, the Send newsletter, I think is exceptional. It's been well received there. But can I put you on the spot? It is early morning. One factor that you think can drive and continue to drive this improvement forward?
It has to be listening to children and young people and their families, because they will be able to advise us best on how to support them. And I think embedding that as part of routine practice and what we do, I think we do that quite routinely, but actually it needs to be a real focus of how we listen to our families and how we support them and their experience of that, because actually that will then drive the next steps that we need to take, and it will ensure that the services that we deliver are meeting their need.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, observations? Mr. Hodgson.
Yes, thanks for the report. I do appreciate the rigour of those inspections, having been on the other side of the Sunderland report recently that came out in the summer. Just picking up on the inclusive education there, how will that be measured in your priorities? How will it be monitored, evaluated, and what is the time scale you've got for actually saying, well, we are making real progress? Is there a time scale to it?
I'll start. There are a number of different ways that we can measure progress in that. One of the key ones is our whole education programme. So that provides schools with a self-evaluation tool which they are able to identify their strengths and areas for development, and we will be able to track that over time so that we can monitor progress. In terms of dates and times, that's going to be happening on a yearly basis for the next 3 years. However, I think it's a continuous journey. I don't think that you can ever achieve at the end of it. I think it's something that is always an ambition that you strive towards. So I think that in terms of measuring it, we have lots of process measures as well. So some of it will be around attainment. But there will also be some measures around the practice around schools, which will be as part of the whole education programme. I don't know if I anything you want to add.
You have, yes, thank you, Sam. Just to say, absolutely, an annual basis, there will be a set of priorities and targets. And actually, there are a number of wider subgroups. This committee in particular will remember the task and finish exclusion subgroup and the work that's had. The impact in that group has been huge, and that has been entirely based around the inclusive education activity. So we've done a huge amount of work, and that continues. That task and finish team is continuing. And Nicola Taylor, I think, do you know, I have a feeling there was a report came to this committee, but it definitely came to the School Forum Committee as well. So we can make sure that all of the measures that are in there are really clear for everyone to see on an annual basis, and we can see that change. I do agree with Sam. I think, you know, we'll never get to the end of this. I think we'll just have some dynamism in it and the priorities and the if you like, the key performance indicators that we measure will change on an annual basis. The needs will change over time. We know at the moment that we have a significant need around ASD, but also around SEMH, our social, emotional and mental health challenges. And that for us, it's a huge amount of work going in at the moment to try and support that, to make sure that we've got the right services and the right level of commitment in there to be able to help more of our young people and our schools, because part of our role is to be able to help our schools be much more inclusive. And that work for me, if we can make a big shift and a real inroad around the SEMH volumes and make sure that more of our young people are within maintained schools, within mainstream schools rather, and actually continuing their education, then that's a huge achievement. So that's a big target that we've currently got at the moment. But I do expect those targets to change year on year.
Okay. Sorry, I'll bring you in a second.
Just to follow on
you had a supplementary, yeah? I'll bring you in.
Sorry, it was just to add to that as well, just for the Scrutiny Committee's assurance. We also have a SEND strategic board that meets on a very regular basis that holds each of the partner agencies and ourselves to account in relation to the areas that we talk about. We're developing a set of meaningful measures, which it sounds like it's quite fluffy, but it's not. It's quite clear about actually how do we demonstrate that we've made progress, concrete progress in the areas that we need to. So we will be able to bring something back which will demonstrate the progress or areas that we need to further develop.
Just picking up the point there. Thanks for your answer, by the way. But on that increase in inclusive education, there's going to be a cost implication to that. Has that been factored in?
Yes, I do. I don't necessarily think it is necessarily a cost implication, no, because increasing inclusive education may mean doing things in a slightly different way, which actually might reduce costs in the longer term. So we do look at opportunities for investment to save, but we also look at opportunities of demonstrating that if we do this in this way, then that will save money in the longer term. So I think you're right. There will be some instances where that might be an issue, but I think we are hopeful that some of the measures and some of the opportunities that we've developed and some of the services that we are using to support our schools will assist in terms of the reduction in longer term costs.
So there's a specific budget matched against those strategic priorities, is there?
No. It's part of an overarching budget that we have. So there will be bits and pieces of budgets allocated to here and there. So we have an inclusion team that works to prevent exclusions, and they obviously have their budget. We have an overarching budget, and we can use the money flexibly as and when we need to in order to help support.
Guy, you wanted to come in again?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Kath sets out all this sort of formal support mechanisms that we have, but myself, I quite like to go AWOL sometimes and go and visit some of these schools by myself, which I don't think they like very much, but but I've done two certainly in the last couple of months, and by going into these schools without anyone else from the council there and just speaking to the staff, the head teachers and the staff and the students themselves, you do get a good idea of where the priorities should lie. And I'd quite like to go and visit some more special needs schools if any members have some in their constituencies that they would like me to go and see.
Okay, any other comments, observations? No? Oh, great. Councillor Dunn.
Thank you. Just on page 29, the implications arising from the report, the property section states that capacity planning for the provision of specialist education may involve capital development. I mean, can you expand on that a bit? And is there specific areas of the county that this would be applicable to?
I was just going to say, I'll let Sue do that.
So,
We do receive grant from central government around growing capacity in special schools. So I think you'll have received some reports in the past where we've expanded various schools, created Ashdale in Ashington, and then the expansion of Hexham Priory, as well as the funding that we've used to create ARPs that we're currently trialling in the Seaton Valley Partnership. In addition to that, the local authority has also got £17 million within its medium-term financial plan to invest over the next 3 years in growing capacity and improving facilities for our special schools. £1 million of that has already been allocated to our SEND free school in Northumberland as well. So hopefully that will also be coming online. So there is a substantial amount of funding, I would say, to support that growth and improvement and capacity moving forward. Thanks.
okay. So, I just want to sum up on this, and again, I want to echo what Kath said there about the support and gratitude to officers for getting us through this, because the key thing in this report, there's lots of information, but we're no longer on a watch list. That's the key thing. We've actually got off that watch list, and we're now free to get on with all of the day-to-day stuff which makes an impact. It makes a difference to young people and their families in our community. And I know Mr. Hodgson, you mentioned about, how we're going to measure, how are we going to evaluate. They're all great things. But actually, in this report, a nice little number, 558. People, real families asked their opinion. And trust me, I've been in these Ofsted meetings when I was deputy leader, and those Ofsted inspectors are intense. And if they had picked up anything they were unhappy with from those families being asked, how are you treated? That would have been reflected in this report, and we wouldn't be off a watch list. We would be under the microscope. And we're still under the microscope because that's a good thing, because it's about continuous improvement. But I think the story here is that down to our individual schools, individual support staff, teachers, the infrastructure, the team here in the county council, and the political leadership, we are actually almost bucking the trend on SEND and actually showing how to be an exemplar of a good authority, and we can always do things better. But I think the fact that we have got a commitment, there's a financial commitment you've heard of as well, the investment we put into Ashington, into Blythe with the free school, into Hexham, into other areas as well, and I hope more areas will benefit. And again, I just always say this to people, when the administration changed in 2017, one of the first things I had was a briefing about our EHCPs, Educational Healthcare Plans, that early doors impact on a young person, what it is, support that they need to take them through the education system, and some of them weren't fit for purpose. And Sam, thanks to you and your team, we did training and we changed those, and now they're really good documents, which is that early intervention to guide a young person through education and into employment. So I think the story is a really positive one. Well done, Kath, you and your team. And actually, this just shows what we can do as a local authority when we get on with a day job instead of some of the other stuff. So, well done, everyone. Thank you very much for that. So, I'm delighted. One other thing on the report, we are asked to do two things. One is to note the contents, and the other one is to support the next steps to be taken. Now, I think part of that next steps is about us getting regular updates and about coming back with challenge. Now, I think we've been very supportive today. I think we've had some good challenge about how we can look at reporting and how we evaluate this. But I think this needs to come back to us on a regular basis, so that we can look at this and, where need be, give advice and support to officers as part of that continuous improvement drive. So there are two things there. Note the report we've done. We've agreed some next steps to be taken. We'll get information and updates. So on that basis, I think we will be happy to accept the report. I'm not seeing any other note. So, yeah, we'll move on to that. So thank you very much for that, and thank you, Audrey and Sam, for that report as well. So, we're now moving on to item number 7 on the agenda, which is the peer review for care leavers service update report, which has been taken by Graham Writer. So, Graham, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a brief report updating from the peer review which was undertaken in 2018. The reason for that peer review was a sense check of where we were at in terms of our support for care leavers following the previous inspection in 2016. Now, since that peer challenge in 2018, we had an action plan which all the actions from which are completed, but subsequent to that, we've had 2 external scrutinies of our services for care leavers, as well as our own quality assurance and quality of practice work. So we had the Irelax Inspection January 2020, which judged overall services are good, but also very positive about the work and support that we gave to our care leavers. But similarly, we had earlier this year a visit from the Department for Educational National Leaving Care Advisor, Mark Riddell, who also found positive work and support with our care leavers. And he also made some recommendations for further improvement. The detail of that has been reported to our corporate parenting advisory group and was considered and detailed there. But one of the main pushes again was around our council's responsibilities as corporate parents. And there's been a lot of work revitalising and widening that work around corporate parenting, both within the council services directorates and with members as well. And that work is ongoing. And part of that is making sure that we as a council are doing the best we can as part of our Care Leavers Covenant, the Care Leavers Covenant. The council committed and signed up to that, making sure we give the best opportunities that we can for our care leavers. But overall, we've seen very positive progress. Again, the idea of continuous improvement, that we never crack this at all. But what we do in terms of our own quality of practice work, we make sure we hear and listen to and talk to our care leavers as much as we possibly can, to both inform our strategic development, but also to make sure that we're doing our best for those individuals. And I've got to say, whenever we look at that work, the tenacity and support with which that is offered from our personal advisors particularly, but also the partnership support to our care leavers, I think is a strength for us currently. So what we've seen is very good progress from that peer challenge. That's been overseen also by external scrutiny, and we also have our continuous improvement where we continue to drive and improve the practice around support for our care leavers, including the opportunities that are available for them through our role as corporate parents. So I think those are the key points that I want to make, and it remains a member priority around corporate parenting for us as a council, which I think is reassuring and positive for us. So it's a brief report updating there, but there's been more action since, and there's detailed oversight on our work with care leavers through our corporate parenting advisory group as well.
Great. Thank you, Graham. If I can bring in Guy as well, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The report follows a very similar vein to the previous report. I took part in the inspection by Mark Riddell. We were interviewed quite thoroughly by him, along with the rest of the senior leadership team at the council. And he later commented that the proactive leadership at the council at an officer and political level was driving forward improvements in the service. Often these reports come to corporate parenting group, and I think I did suggest that some of them should come to FACS so they get a wider viewing throughout the council. So it's not just the corporate parenting group. We've had the leader of the council come to the corporate parenting group, so he has a better understanding. And we're looking at, well, there's 2 things that I'm very keen on. One is better member training on their responsibilities as corporate parents, because I think a lot of members still don't really understand what that means. And secondly, how the council and its corporate arms, so Advance and the one with the health centres and others, Active, sorry, how they can tweak their HR and recruitment processes and perhaps their apprenticeship programmes so that they are slanted towards favouring some of our own care leavers. And that's something I'm very keen to do. Obviously, you're limited from a legal perspective on how you can favour different groups of people. But if we can find a way where we could say, if you're a care leaver, you automatically get first dibs at a job at Northumberland County Council, that is a way that we can help improve their lives going forward. So I'm very keen that that is explored. And we've already seen that with the fire service, Graham. Perhaps it would be handy if you could tell the committee what fire services?
Yeah, what we've been developing following Mark Riddell's visit and revitalising that, what we have corporately is a promise to all our looked after children care leavers about how we will support them and the ways in which we will support them. But what we've done as part of the recovery planning from the pandemic is make sure that the social core responsibility around corporate parenting is embedded across the council. And as part of that, and as part of that work, I've been going around my colleagues as service directors across the council, getting them to deliver a promise for what they can offer to our looked after children and care leavers. And the exemplar for that is from our fire service, who are offering a range of mentoring, work experience, apprenticeships, support to individuals in terms of preparing for adulthood, a whole range of ways which they are committed to promise. Now, we've got to work out and monitor the effectiveness of that, but we've had that replicated across a range of, and continue to, across a range of our council services as well, which I think is a real strength. I mean, the question we always ask is this good enough for your child? Are we, as a corporate parent, doing what we would for our child, which is what we were talking about when we talk about our looked after children and our care leavers? And that question's been asked, and we've had really positive responses from my colleagues in their departments, and again, positive responses from members at corporate parents. But we want to keep developing and driving that understanding and that commitment to our children and our young people.
Yeah, thank you, Graham.
I mean, we'll always be judged by how we treat our weakest members of society, and these are our weakest members of society, and we need to make sure that they get the very, very best start in life, and we support them, continue to support them throughout their life.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Taylor.
Just a question, really. We invited Mark Riddell to come and contribute sort of like his experience. In reading in the report, we've got, he looked at the service and we've taken recommendations that those were deemed appropriate and relevant. Was there a reason why we disregarded some?
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, Mark Riddell was very helpful in terms of the challenge he provided for us and the drive for the corporate parenting, and he came up with some detailed options for us to consider, I think would be fair, which were based on his previous experience, which we've got to say were some years ago, but also didn't quite fit with where we were at as well. So they weren't dismissed, but I think they weren't right for where we were at. They were considered but not taken forward, because I think he was here for 2 days. He provided a very effective challenge and external scrutiny and came with some ideas. But we're given our detailed understanding of where we were at. Some of those recommendations didn't quite fit with where we were at.
Happy with that? Yeah. Councillor Ball.
I just want to check, the members' training, when is that scheduled to take place for all members? And also, we were talking about a skills audit of members as well. When is that going to happen? And the other point is, with to be assured that the action plan is in place to take forward, what are the key points and when will they be getting monitored? Thank you.
Well, the key points of the action plan, in terms of internally, we have a continuous improvement plan, which we monitor on a monthly basis, which will include that. Separate to that, the more detailed oversight of the care leavers strategy and action plan will be undertaken through corporate parenting as well in terms of that. So we have both internal and member scrutiny around those processes very regularly. In terms of the...
And I think just to add to that as well, Graham, we do have planned some member training on corporate parenting. We had a very, very good session a few weeks ago, which was obviously you're aware of, which actually looked at some very precise measures that we're going to put in place, which will form part of this assurance. So I think we can, once those have been nailed down in terms of time, then we'll circulate those to all members, because everybody on this committee, every elected member is a corporate parent and has responsibility. So, yeah. Any other comments, observations? Again, thank you for the report. And I know that, again, we should use our powers as a council to support apprenticeships and that pathway into employment. And I know I'm doing a piece of work outside of the council on a similar thing. So there's lots of other organisations doing the same thing as well. So thank you very much for that, Graham. It's a very good report and update. Right, and again, I think we've met the two things there, which is that we're assured there is an action plan. So we've done that, and we have an overview of what is happening. So happy with those. Right, we are now moving on to item number 8. It's a word I don't like. It's a word complaint. I think there's, we'll talk about that later. Right, it's item number 8. It's Complaints Annual Report 2021, which is being dealt with by Karen, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Chair. My name's Karen Willis. I'm the Complaints Manager for Children's Services. The report we're bringing forward today is, it is a statutory requirement under the Children's Regulations, Representations Regulations, for how the Council manage and deal with complaints or representations received from primarily young people in the authority. The regulations are designed for the young people. However, we're tending to find that a lot more adults are using it now. Well, we're not getting as many complaints from our young people. However, the report itself identifies that the young people themselves have so many different avenues for bringing representations forward. They tend to get resolved quite quickly at within frontline services. So the complaints or representations we tend to get through or more from adults and are dealt with through the regulations process. So this report is just to advise committee as to how they've been managed throughout the year, how many have been received, how they've been managed, and the main focus of these, if dealing with complaints, is to achieve resolution wherever possible and obtain learning for the council to take forward improvements in service wherever identified as possible. Sometimes it's individual practice, but others it's more of a wider issue. So we do identify those and take them forward. So the report is just for information to let you know how they're managed, what resolution we get from them, and how that's fed back into embedded into service practice. So, as I say, the report is just for information, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. I do make the point of it's just about this. I understand it's a statutory instrument, but you'll also get compliments as well. And every complaint is an opportunity to improve a service. I'm sure if maybe it's just me. I just think it's about an improvement to service, and everyone who realises or has had a bad experience, that can be used to improve the experience for other people. So maybe I'm just being a bit pedantic here. Right. So, question. Oh, there we go. Come on.
Not a question, just a point of clarification. So the report that you have in front of you has adult social care complaints in as well. That isn't for consideration today. That's considered by a different scrutiny committee. I would just like to reassert that issue that we always see complaints as an opportunity for us to be able to learn. And I don't say that lightly, because that hasn't always been the case. We haven't always dealt with complaints or embraced complaints in the... Embrace is a bit fluffy, I know, but we haven't always embraced complaints in the way that we do currently. And whilst we have one or two prolific complainers, we always try to ensure that the messages or the information that they are imparting to us is used to inform our practice in the future, and part of that continuous improvement journey. So our complaints and the outcomes of those complaints are used to improve our practice across the board, and we will use that as opportunities to, you'll see reference to some of the areas that are identified in some of our action plans or some of our continuous improvement plans and some of our team plans. And Karen has been instrumental in ensuring that the messages are very clear, and we are able to group that learning together in order to be able to understand what some of our families experience, because the only way that we can improve those services is by hearing from families. Equally, and we do try to celebrate the compliments that we get. Social work in particular is never subject to very much praise or recognition, and we often have a focus on the negatives or the impact that families believe that social workers are having. So where we do get positive feedback, we always ensure that, so Graham and I always get a notification of that, and we always ensure that we have a conversation via either directly or via email with our staff, so that they recognise the importance of that positive feedback.
Okay. just if I can, just drill it. Sorry, Guy, I'll bring you in, then I'll come in with what I was
No,
gonna say.
it's actually a question rather than a lead member pontification. So I can
Go for it.
So we'll the front page of this. Obviously, you've got NCC, Northumbria Healthcare, and the CCG. Will that look different next year with the dissolution of the partnership? So how will this change?
So in terms of the children's services, it will just focus on children's services. It will simply be an annual report from children's services. It won't include anyone else. And likewise for adults, it will be a separate report that will just focus on adults.
Graham, I think you wanted to come in as well.
Yeah, just about the complements point as well, and how it is. The first point will be just to re-emphasise what Kath's saying about that. This is a crucial element of our quality of practice and quality assurance work. So we've set up a working group, but they will report both monthly in terms of making sure we're tracking the progress of complaints, but quarterly with themes comes into our quality performance group, which basically puts up all our performance information around audits, around practice days, but the complaints are a key element of that. So that does inform our continuous improvement plan and make sure that we continue to focus on that. And the other element is the complements, again, which are listed in here, which are, as Kath says, about social workers, but also the range of other staff within the social care service as well. So we are working hard to make sure we're pulling complements, and that when we do get them, those are referred to and collated by Karen's team as well.
Yeah. So, Karen, I was just wondering if you could just talk me through how a complaint or a concern is escalated. So, some of it, I'm guessing, maybe can just be dealt with over the phone or by email or letter. But if something is perhaps uncovers a little bit of extra work, how is that actually managed by the team?
There's a lot of we deal with everything as an inquiry when it first comes in until we've actually assessed it to find out whether it can be quickly resolved by frontline services. If it's something a little bit more in depth, or the department have already had an opportunity to resolve it and can't, it then comes back to us and we record it within either one of two processes. Obviously, we've got the children's social care regulations, which covers most of the Children Act for the looked after services and other certain areas as well. If it doesn't fall within those regulations, we use the council's corporate set process. So there's two different processes that they can fall under. The statutory one is a three-stage process. It's first stage, it's local resolution, so a team manager at the closest point of service delivery would actually undertake an investigation at that point in time. My team would agree the points of complaint with the complainant and make sure that they are investigatable and we can get an outcome from it. The stage one involves the team manager doing that investigation, sending out a written response. If the person is then still dissatisfied, because we always ask them what they're looking for in terms of remedy and outcome, if they remain dissatisfied, we will undertake further work with them to try and achieve that resolution, because that's the main theme throughout all complaints is you know, to try and achieve resolution in that sense. But if they remain dissatisfied in the children's process, it then goes on to what's called an independent investigation at stage 2. That involves the council commissioning an independent investigator and an independent person as set out in the regulations. One undertakes the investigation, one oversees the process to make sure that it's done in line with regulations. They produce a report that the council then have to consider, which contains the findings. It often goes to Graham as adjudicating officer to respond on behalf of the council at that point. He will consider the findings, the recommendations, and a letter will go out to the complainant. If they still remain dissatisfied, they can take it to a stage 3, which is an independent review panel, which involves us again commissioning 3 independent members from we use the NEPO portal for that, to get those officers. We'll hold a review panel where the complainant can come in, put their case forward. The adjudicating officer represents the council. They will produce a final report, which then goes to Kath, and we do a final response to them from there. Thereafter, if they're still dissatisfied, they can actually go off to the local government and social care ombudsman. The corporate process, which we're using a little bit more with adults within the process, that's a 2-stage process. So stage 1 is again local resolution with a team manager. Stage 2 is a review by a senior manager, and then again off to the ombudsman after that. So that's how it's, my team sort of manage it throughout the process to make sure timescales are adhered to, and as always, try to achieve the resolution.
So on both the complaint element, that's used to improve practice, but also as well those compliments that come through, so it's more easy to whinge, we all know this, but for those things that come through as very positive, which I'm sure is the overwhelming majority, that is fed back to staff and used almost to celebrate good practice as well. Excellent. Right. Okay, so there we go. Well, thank you very much for that. Well, we'll be seeing you again at some point with a new branding on it. So there you go. I can't see any other comments from anyone. No, sorry. Yeah, Reverend Lennox.
I'm always interested in comparing Northumberland with other authorities, and I note in paragraph 1.9 we are compared with Durham. I just want to know why Durham. Is it because Durham's figure is particularly low compared to Northumberland? How do we compare with other authorities?
No, we use those authorities because it's a similar comparison with the local government and social care ombudsman. Yeah. They deal with, on their website you can actually go onto one of their maps, and we are considered in the same category as those, being a similar council. And so we use the comparative factors with similar authorities rather than just the ones nearby, because we're different sort of makeup of the authority. So we do similar type of authorities to ourselves to do that comparison.
Okay. Right, so on that point, can't see any other comments. We'll note that report. Thank you very much. We'll see you again soon. We're now moving on to item number 9 on the agenda, which is the work programme. And I think, Chris Angus, you want to note a few tweaks to the work programme.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, there's been a couple of changes since the agenda was published, namely for the October meeting. There's the additional pre-scrutiny item for the education infrastructure contribution policy that will be coming in October. That meant that the agenda was looking a bit full, so we've moved the children's home placement sufficiency into November. That's the only thing that's on the agenda at the moment for November. But as always, if members have anything that they want to add to the work programme, you just need to speak to either Councillor Daly or myself, and we'll try and get it on.
Yeah. So again, just reinforcing one of the things I said when I took over as chair, please, if you have anything that you'd like us to look at, contact myself or Chris. And of course, written on here as well is some areas around themed scrutiny, which proved extremely successful with our exclusions. Councillor Swinburne dealt with that one. And I think it's really important that we start to look at some key areas of work. So please, anything, come back to us. We'll also obviously feedbacks, because I've got some ideas about some things I'd like to look at as well. So again, open door, please come and we'll have a look at some things. The other thing as well is Councillor, I don't know, you need to wave at me more. And
I just couldn't hear Chris very well there. Did he say something had been moved to November?
Yeah, sorry. It was the children's home placement sufficiency report is being moved to November.
Can we send an updated version of it round so everyone's got that? The other thing as well is I spoke to Chris before we started the meeting today, because they did promise that we were going to take us all out on a jolly. We're going to go out visiting parts of Northumberland rather than sitting in County Hall, lovely though it is. So I think we're looking into the new year, and we'll be looking at a couple of places where we'll be out and about around our glorious county. So there we are. Get us out of Morpeth. Wow. I have not been informed of any other business or any urgent business. I'm not saying anything from the floor. So on that note, thank you all for your time today. Thank you to our officers, Guy for attending as well. And we'll see you at the next meeting. So thank you very much.